When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I don't remember when I first heard about the hospital. Perhaps it was whispered to me over drinks late at night in Seoul, or maybe I read some half-forgotten article buried in a travel forum. What I do remember is that by the time I arrived in South Korea, the idea of it had already grown inside me, like a seed that would not be ignored. People called it Gumhwa General, though the building had not functioned as a real hospital for nearly 20 years. To the locals, it was something else entirely, an abandoned shell, a place where the walls remembered too much. I should introduce myself before I go further. My name is Daniel Morton, and I am not Korean. I was born in Manchester, but I've spent most of my adult life wandering from one place to another, writing about forgotten buildings, ruins, and the legends that cling to them. Some call it dark tourism, but I have always thought of it as chasing shadows. My readers back in Europe want more than just photographs of temples or landscapes. They want stories that feel like they belong to the bones of the earth. And I suppose that's what I am always searching for. Proof that the places we abandon do not abandon us in return. That is how I found myself standing before Gumhwa General on a wet spring evening. The building rose like a carcass against the skyline, its once white exterior now stained with mildew and soot, windows cracked or sealed with rusted shutters. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, even though no cleaning staff had worked there for decades, as though the walls themselves exhaled the memory of antiseptic. I had been warned not to go alone, but warnings like that only serve as invitations to someone like me. Still, I wasn't completely reckless. I arranged permission through a local acquaintance, a night shift security guard named Mr. Han. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s, with a habit of rubbing his hands together as though trying to wash them even when they were dry. Han agreed to let me explore the hospital under his supervision, though he insisted we only enter after midnight. During the day, he told me, it's just an empty building. At night, it remembers what it used to be. When he said this, I felt the first real shiver crawl down my spine. The interior of the hospital was worse than I had imagined. The moment we pushed the doors open, the smell of rust, mold, and something sharper, like old blood, hit me. The corridors stretched in both directions, lined with peeling paint and broken ceiling tiles that sagged like diseased skin. My footsteps echoed strangely, too sharp for a space so narrow, as though the building were amplifying them. I carried a small recorder in my jacket pocket. Every time I investigate a place, I keep it running. It's not just for writing later, it's for the silences, for the things that sometimes creep into the edges of sound. Han noticed the red light blinking on my recorder and frowned. "Be careful," he muttered. Sometimes it picks up what we cannot hear." We walked deeper into the corridor, our flashlight beams crossing over faded signs. Surgery Ward A, Pediatrics, Maternity. Each door seemed heavier than the last, as though holding back something unseen. The walls bore scratches, graffiti, and stains too dark to name. I found myself staring at one patch of floor where the linoleum had been scrubbed raw, as if someone had tried to erase a mark that refused to disappear. That was when I first heard it. Click, click, click. The sound was faint, like someone approaching from a distance. High heels sharp against the hospital's tile. I froze, thinking perhaps another security guard was patrolling, or maybe someone else had entered the building without permission. But when I looked at Han, I saw his face pale under the weak flashlight glow. "You hear it too?" I whispered. He nodded. His lips moved, but no words came out at first. Finally, he managed, "It always begins like this." The steps continued, steady, deliberate, growing closer. Click, click, click. Each strike echoed with an unnatural rhythm, too perfect, as if whoever, or whatever, walked had no weight at all. We turned toward the sound, shining our flashlights down the corridor. Nothing. The hallway stretched empty, walls bending toward darkness, the floor gleaming faintly with moisture. Yet the steps continued. They were not behind us, nor in front of us, but somehow inside the corridor itself, as though the sound had been stitched into the air long ago and now played itself again for our benefit. Han raised his hand, signaling me to stay still. The steps slowed, hesitated, then resumed, this time closer, as if the invisible walker had noticed us. My heart pounded so violently I thought the recorder in my pocket might capture it. Then silence. Complete suffocating silence. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. My ears rang with the absence of sound. It lasted long enough for me to question whether I had truly heard anything at all, until Han spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "They say it is the head nurse," he told me. "A woman who worked here in the 1980s. Strict, unforgiving. Some patients feared her more than their illnesses. She died in this hospital, but not in a bed. They say she fell from the rooftop, but at night she still patrols the hallways, making sure no one breaks the rules." I wanted to ask him if he believed that story, but before I could, the sound returned. This time not from far away, but right beside us. Click. I felt it in my chest more than in my ears, a vibration that seemed to travel up through the floor. My flashlight beam shook as I lifted it. For a second, no longer than a blink, I saw something move at the end of the hallway. A figure tall and slender, her hair tied tightly back, her uniform crisp white though the building itself had long since rotted. She looked like a nurse, yes, but her face was hidden, swallowed in shadow, as if the light refused to touch it. Then she was gone. The corridor lay empty once again. Han grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my sleeve. "Do not follow," he warned. "She does not like intruders." I nodded, though part of me burned with the urge to chase after her. This was why I came after all. To witness, to capture, to prove to myself and others that the stories were more than just whispers, but the terror that coiled in my stomach was too real to ignore. We returned to the lobby in silence. My recorder still blinked red, the tape inside turning slowly. I wanted to play it back right then, to hear if the sound had been captured, but Hans shook his head. "Not here, not tonight," he said firmly. "The walls have ears." His choice of words unsettled me more than the footsteps themselves. I left the hospital just before dawn. Outside, the city was waking, the smell of bread rising from bakeries, the hum of buses beginning their morning routes. The normal world had returned, indifferent to the secrets of the abandoned building. Yet I carried those footsteps inside me, echoing long after the night had ended. That morning I wrote the first lines of this account in my notebook. The hospital may be dead, but at night it still remembers how to walk. And though I told myself it was only the beginning of research, I knew even then that I was already entangled. I returned to my rented apartment just as the city of Seoul began to shake off its night. The street vendors were setting up their stalls, voices sharp with the clatter of steel and wood. The sky was the color of wet ash, and I could not shake the feeling that it had followed me out of the hospital. The grayness, the stale air, the echo of shoes striking tile where no one walked. I tried to sleep, but the memory of the sound would not let me. Every time my eyes closed, I heard it again. Click, 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 moving steadily toward me, stopping just before it should have reached my bed. When I finally drifted into shallow dreams, I woke with the taste of iron in my mouth as though I had bitten my tongue. Later that afternoon, I met Han in a small pojangmasha, a street tent that sold cheap soju and steaming bowls of tteokbokki. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He looked older in daylight, as though the night had stretched his features thin. "You shouldn't go back," he said without even waiting for me to sit. I raised an eyebrow. But I will. You knew that when you let me in. Han sighed heavily, pouring himself a small cup of soju. Curiosity is a knife, he muttered. Useful when you cut vegetables. Deadly when you point it toward your own heart. I smiled at the metaphor, but he didn't. Tell me, I pressed, leaning across the table. Who was she, really? The nurse? He didn't answer immediately. He stared into his drink as though something floated in its cloudy depths. Finally, he said, her name was Im Hye-jin. She worked there more than 30 years ago. She was strict, yes, but respected. People say she was like a second mother to the patients. Others say she was cruel. Maybe both were true. I don't know. What I do know is this. She died in the hospital, and the hospital refuses to forget her. Died how? Some say suicide, some say accident, some say murder. He lowered his voice on that last word, and though the tent was noisy with evening customers, I felt the temperature drop around us. Han rubbed his hands together again, his nervous habit. After her death, strange things began happening. Nurses who stayed late heard footsteps. Patients claimed to see her shadow standing by their beds. Then, more deaths followed. A patient hanged himself in the bathroom. A doctor collapsed in the corridor. A child disappeared. The hospital closed not long after. I scribbled notes furiously, though my hand trembled. And you still work there? I don't work for the hospital, he corrected. I work for the company that owns the land. They keep a guard on site to stop vandals. But it's not vandals you need to fear. His words settled in me like stones dropped into deep water. That night I listened to the recording from my pocket. At first it was nothing but static, the rustle of my jacket, Han's muttering voice. But then, there it was. Click, click, click. Perfectly clear. Louder than I remembered. My stomach tightened as I listened to the rhythm grow closer, until the last strike landed so sharp it seemed to split the tape. Then silence. I replayed it 3 times, each time hoping it would vanish, that my imagination had imprinted itself on the audio. But no, the sound was real, captured, proof. I should have felt triumphant. This was exactly what I had come for. Instead, my room seemed smaller with every repetition, the walls leaning closer. I turned off the recorder and shoved it into my bag, but the silence afterward felt worse than the footsteps themselves. The next evening, I found myself back at the hospital gates. Han was waiting, smoking a cigarette down to the filter. His face tightened when he saw me. You really are stubborn, he said. Curiosity, remember? I tried to smile. It didn't reach my eyes. We stepped inside together. The building smelled stronger this time, mold mixed with disinfectant, and underneath, a copper tang that turned my stomach. The same corridors stretched before us, endless, as though they had lengthened in my absence. Han carried an old lantern instead of a flashlight tonight. Its glow flickered, painting the walls in trembling shadows. Electric light fails sometimes, he explained, but fire keeps them away. I wanted to ask him who them was, but I bit back the question. Some answers, I suspected, were best left unspoken. We passed the pediatric ward. The air grew colder, the walls lined with faded murals of cartoon rabbits and smiling suns. Someone had scrawled black ink over the painted faces, blotting out their eyes. A child's toy lay in the corner, a one-eyed bear with stuffing spilling from its chest. When I bent to pick it up, Han hissed sharply. Don't touch anything, he warned. The things here are not just objects. They remember. So I let the bear lie there, its stitched smile crooked, as though it mocked my hesitation. We reached the maternity wing, and that was when it began again. Click, click, click. This time the sound was not distant. It came from directly behind us, each step measured, unhurried but deliberate. But I spun, my lantern beam sweeping across the corridor. Nothing, but the steps continued. Han muttered something under his breath. A prayer, perhaps, though I couldn't recognize the words. He clutched the lantern tighter. "She doesn't like us here," he said. "We should leave." But I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to see." The footsteps grew louder, nearer. They circled us, though no figure appeared. I swear I felt the brush of air against my arm, as if someone had passed by inches from my skin. My throat tightened. Then I heard it. Not just the shoes, but a voice. A woman's voice. Soft, clipped, like a nurse giving orders. The words were in Korean, but I understood the tone. Stern, impatient, commanding. "Stand straight. Don't move." Han's face drained of blood. "She's here," he whispered. The lantern flickered violently, almost extinguishing. For a moment I saw her again. The nurse, standing at the far end of the hall. Her uniform gleamed impossibly white against the rot around her. Her face again was obscured, swallowed by shadow. But this time I noticed her hands. They were gloved, but the gloves dripped red as though freshly soaked. I stumbled backward. Han grabbed my arm. "Enough! You asked for warning. This is it. Do not come back again." We fled down the corridor, the footsteps following us, faster now, echoing like a heart pounding in panic. Click, 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 click. They chased us to the very door, stopping only when the night air rushed against our faces. Outside, the city lights seemed unreal, like stars painted on paper. I bent over, gasping, while Han lit another cigarette with trembling hands. "She doesn't forgive," he said. "Not trespassers, not sinners, no one." I asked him what he meant by sinners, but he shook his head and walked away, leaving me alone under the streetlight. That night I dreamed of the nurse. She stood at the foot of my bed, her shoes clicking softly against the floorboards. Though I knew I was in my apartment and not the hospital, her face remained hidden, a void where features should be. In her hand, she carried a clipboard stained with something dark. She pointed at me, tapping the paper with a pen. When I woke, my heart hammered against my ribs. On the nightstand lay my notebook, open to a blank page. But across it, in neat handwriting not my own, were 3 words in English. "Stand, don't move." The words on my notebook haunted me more than the sound itself. Stand, don't move. I had not written them. I know my own handwriting, the way my letters tilt slightly to the left, how my T slants into its neighbor. These words were sharp, precise, almost surgical, as though they had been carved into the page rather than written. For hours I sat staring at them, waiting for some rational explanation. Sleepwalking? An unconscious trick of the hand? But the pen I had left capped on the desk was still capped. The ink was not mine, and yet the words sat there, waiting for me to acknowledge them. By morning I had convinced myself it was a prank. Perhaps Han had slipped the note into my notebook when I wasn't looking. Perhaps he wanted to frighten me away from returning. But even as I formed the excuse, I didn't believe it. Han was wary, yes, but his fear had been genuine. He had no need to manufacture what the hospital already supplied in abundance. The days that followed grew stranger. I tried to distract myself by visiting other sites in the city. An old Confucian shrine, a war museum, even the glittering neon of Myeongdong. But everywhere I went, the echo followed me. Click, click, click. Sometimes I heard it on the subway platform, faint beneath the rush of arriving trains. Other times it came from behind me on crowded streets, though no one around me wore heels. It was never loud, never overt, but always close enough to remind me that I was not free of her. The nights were worse. I dreamed of the hospital corridors, but they were not empty this time. Beds lined the walls, each occupied by a figure draped in sheets. I would walk past them, trying not to look, but their heads would turn under the covers, faceless, straining toward me with breath that smelled of rot. And always, always, I heard the footsteps approaching. One night I woke to find my apartment door unlocked. I am meticulous about locking it. I always check twice, but the bolt was thrown open, the chain dangling. My throat tightened as I realized If someone had come inside, they had not needed to force entry. I met Han again 2 evenings later. He seemed thinner, his skin gray, as though sleep had abandoned him. When I told him about the note and the footsteps outside the hospital, he shook his head slowly. "I warned you," he said. "Once she notices you, she doesn't stop." "Wayne, but why me?" I asked, my voice rising with desperation. "I'm not Korean. I have no connection to that place. Why would she care about me?" Han's eyes darkened. "The hospital does not care about nationality. The dead do not need passports." His words chilled me more than any ghost story. "Then what does she want?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice as though the other diners might overhear. "Discipline. Obedience. She was a nurse. She gave orders. She punished those who disobeyed. If she has chosen you, it is because she sees something in you that requires correction." Correction? The word lodged in my mind like a splinter. That night I tried something different. Instead of fighting sleep, I embraced it. I left my recorder running on the nightstand, set a candle by the bed, and told myself that if she came again, I would not look away. The dream came quickly. I stood in the maternity ward again, the faded murals of rabbits smiling down at me. The air was cold, each breath turning to frost. At the end of the corridor, the nurse appeared. Her heels struck the tile, each step deliberate. This time, her face was not hidden in shadow. It was worse. Her face was a mask of flesh stitched too tight. The skin around her mouth was pulled back, exposing teeth in a permanent, unnatural grin. Her eyes were sunken hollows, black as spilled ink. Yet despite the grotesque features, her uniform was spotless, her gloves pristine, except for the drip of red at the fingertips. She raised her clipboard and spoke. Her Korean was formal, precise, but somehow I understood every word. "Stand. Don't move." I obeyed. My body froze as though chained. She approached, each step echoing in my skull. When she stopped before me, I could smell her, antiseptic mixed with decay, as if rot itself had been sterilized. Her gloved hand touched my chest, pressing lightly, and I felt the weight of her authority. I could not breathe. Then she leaned close, whispering into my ear. The words were not clear, only fragments. Something about rules, about order, about punishment. My skin crawled where her breath touched it. When I woke, the candle had burned down to nothing. The room filled with smoke. My recorder still blinked red. I played it back with trembling fingers. At first static. Then her voice. Not faint, not dreamlike, but clear as if she had stood beside the microphone. "Stand. Don't move." And then a sound I cannot explain. A slow, wet exhalation, like lungs filled with water. The following day, I noticed something else. A bruise on my chest, right where she had pressed her hand. It was small, circular, the exact shape of a gloved fingertip. I told myself it must be an accident, the mark of how I had slept. But deep down, I knew better. The boundary between dream and waking life began to blur. I would hear the echo of her shoes while writing at a cafe. I saw her reflection once in a shop window, tall, uniform white, though when I turned, there was only a crowd of strangers. Sleep became dangerous. Each time I closed my eyes, the nurse came closer. One night, she ordered me to lie down. Beds appeared around me, their sheets stained with old blood. Faceless figures restrained me as she prepared a syringe, the needle glinting like a sliver of moonlight. I woke gasping, but the pain in my arm was real. A small puncture, red and raw, as though a needle had kissed my skin. That was the moment I realized this was no longer just research. The hospital had followed me, or worse, the nurse herself had chosen me, carrying her rules beyond the boundaries of that decaying building. I confronted Han once more. His eyes widened when I showed him the bruise on my chest, the mark on my arm. He made the sign of the cross, though I knew he wasn't Christian. "You must leave," he said. "Not just soul, The country. She will not let go otherwise. Done. But if I leave, I asked, my voice breaking, will she stop? He didn't answer immediately. Then he shook his head. Some rules are written in the body. Once you are on her list, you cannot erase it. His words left me hollow. A list. Was that what the clipboard was? A record of those who had disobeyed? Was I now one of them? That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were inside my apartment, moving across the floor with steady patience. I shut my eyes, whispering to myself that it was only imagination, only the memory of sound. But then I felt it, the weight of her presence at the foot of my bed, in a voice soft, precise, impossibly close. You're not standing. The words she whispered still throbbed in my skull. You're not standing. It was a reprimand, not a threat. Yet somehow the reprimand carried more weight than any curse. I woke shaking, my sheets damp with sweat, the air in my apartment heavy with the scent of antiseptic. For a long time I simply sat there in the half-light of dawn, waiting for the world to feel real again. But it didn't. Not anymore. The clipboard. That was the key. She carried it in every vision, every dream. Her hands, gloved and stained, clutched it with the devotion of a priest holding scripture. When she tapped the pen against its surface, I felt as though she were striking my own bones. I had to know what was written on it. The next day I met Han again, though he was reluctant. His face looked gaunter than before, as though he had aged 10 years in the span of a week. He didn't want to see me. I had to corner him outside the security booth near the hospital gates. You've seen the clipboard, haven't you? I demanded. He froze. For a moment I thought he would deny it. Instead, he let out a low groan, rubbing his hands together. You shouldn't ask about that. But it's important, I pressed. She carries it everywhere. What is it? Han's eyes darted to the hospital windows, all black voids reflecting nothing. His voice dropped. It's the list. The list. The names of those who disobeyed. Patients, staff, trespassers, anyone who broke her rules. Once your name is written, it doesn't matter where you go. The hospital follows. She follows. I swallowed hard. And you? Have you seen your name there? Han shook his head violently. No, I follow the rules. Always. I never stand where I shouldn't. Never speak when she passes. Never touch what belongs to her. The emphasis on the last sentence made me shiver. My mind flickered to the one-eyed bear in the pediatric ward, the way Han had stopped me from picking it up. What happens to those who are on the list? I asked. He stared at me for a long time, then said simply, they vanish. Some are found dead. Others, just gone, like they never existed. I tried to laugh it off, but my throat caught. So you're saying if my name is written there, I'll... Han cut me off sharply. Not if. The silence after that was unbearable. That evening I replayed my recordings again. Most were static, fragments of the footsteps, faint traces of her voice. But one section, buried between bursts of noise, made my blood freeze. A woman's voice, precise, clinical, reciting names. Korean names, one after another. Then, unmistakably, mine. Daniel Morton. The voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but final in its authority. I dropped the recorder. It clattered against the floor. The sound too loud, too real. My stomach twisted. I wanted to tell myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the static, but I knew. I had been entered on the list. The nights grew worse. I dreamed of the hospital constantly, not the ruined shell I had walked through, but the building as it once had been, bright, sterile, filled with the hum of machines. Patients in gowns shuffled through the halls. Nurses whispered in corners, but none of them had faces. Every one of them was smooth where eyes, mouths, and noses should be. And always the nurse appeared, her shoes clicking, clipboard in hand. She would stop before each faceless patient, tapping her pen, muttering names in a language I half understood. Each time she spoke mine, I felt the air thicken, as though the hospital itself were pressing closer, eager to claim me. One night she ordered me to follow. I tried to resist, but my legs moved on their own. She led me into a ward I had not seen before, walls painted pale green, the smell of disinfectant sharp enough to burn. Beds lined both sides, each occupied by still bodies under thin sheets. She tapped the clipboard again. "These are the forgotten," she whispered. I pulled back a sheet from one of the beds. A man lay beneath, eyes wide open, his mouth frozen in a scream. His chest did not rise. His skin was pale wax. Yet when I leaned closer, I swear I heard the faintest whisper of breath, like wind through a closed window. "Why are they here?" I asked, though my voice trembled. "Disobedience," she said simply. Her gloved hand pointed to another bed. I peeled back the sheet reluctantly. This time it was a child, no older than 6, her face twisted with terror. Around her neck was a faint bruise, a mark like rope. My stomach lurched. I staggered back, but the nurse stepped closer. "Disobedience," she repeated. When I woke, the smell of disinfectant lingered in my apartment. I checked my notebook again. New words had appeared, written in the same sharp hand as before. "You belong to the list." The next day, I forced Han to speak more. I cornered him outside a convenience store, ignoring his protests. "You said people vanish. Tell me about them. Who were they?" He hesitated, then relented. "There was a doctor, Dr. Choi. He stayed late one night, falsifying reports, hiding his mistakes. Patients had died under his care. He ignored the nurse's footsteps, pretended not to hear. The next morning, they found him in the surgery ward, standing upright, eyes open, but gone inside. His body breathed, his heart beat. But no one could wake him. He is still in a nursing home. 30 years later, a living corpse." I shuddered. There was a patient, a man who beat his wife. He shouted at the staff, ignored instructions. One night he walked out of his room, straight into the dark. They found him in the stairwell, twisted, every bone broken, as though he had been thrown from the roof. But the doors to the roof were locked. Han's eyes burned with fear as he continued. "And there was a foreigner years ago, an American soldier. He came with friends, drunk, daring each other to enter. He mocked the footsteps, shouted obscenities, even kicked over an old wheelchair. The next day, only his friends returned. They said he went missing. The army searched, nothing, no trace. It was as if the hospital swallowed him whole." His words struck me like a hammer. Another foreigner, another intruder who had laughed, disobeyed, and paid the price. I asked Han, my voice barely steady, "Do you think my name is already written?" He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. That night I dreamed again of the clipboard. This time she showed it to me. The paper was endless, stretching beyond the page, filled with rows of names in precise handwriting. Korean characters dominated, but here and there I saw foreign letters. My eyes scanned the list until I found it. Morton, Daniel. Beside my name, a red check mark bled through the page like fresh blood. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the hospital walls. The nurse smiled her grotesque stitched smile and whispered, "Correction begins soon." I used to think fear was loud. Screams, pounding heartbeats, the rush of blood in your ears. But fear, true fear, is quiet. It creeps into your life like a second shadow. It teaches you to listen for the silence between sounds. It makes you flinch not at what is there, but at what is missing. That is what the nurse taught me. For days after I saw my name on the clipboard, I could not sleep. The world around me began to warp. My reflection in mirrors lagged half a second behind. The hands of the clock in my apartment skipped minutes, then reversed. Sometimes in broad daylight, I would catch the faint click of her shoes in the hallway outside. Not fast, not threatening, just patient, always approaching. And then came the punishments. The first was small. I was drinking water from a glass when the taste shifted. Metallic, bitter. I spat it out. The water in the glass had turned red. My stomach lurched. I dropped it, shards scattering across the kitchen floor. I stared at the crimson spreading between the cracks. But when I bent closer, it wasn't blood, just water. Clear, clean. Still, my lips tasted of iron for hours afterward. The second punishment was worse. I was working at my desk, trying to write everything down before memory betrayed me. My lamp flickered once, twice, then went out. I thought the bulb had burned, but when I turned, the room was not dark. Every surface glowed faintly, as if covered with a thin film of moonlight. And then I noticed the beds, dozens of them, stretching wall to wall in my apartment, each covered with white sheets. I froze, bile rising in my throat. Slowly, the sheets began to rise and fall, shallow breaths beneath them. A whisper brushed my ear. Correction begins. I blinked, and the beds were gone. Only my apartment remained, but the air stank of antiseptic, thick and suffocating. The third punishment nearly broke me. I was brushing my teeth, staring at the mirror. My reflection did not move. My arms moved, my mouth foamed with paste, but the figure in the mirror stood still, watching. And then slowly it raised a clipboard. My knees buckled. I spat foam into the sink, choking. When I looked again, my reflection was normal, but on the mirror's surface, written in condensation, though the glass was dry, were the words, "Follow the rules." I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. My notebook filled with frantic scribbles, times, dates, fragments of her voice, sketches of her stitched face. I tried to ground myself with reason, but reason had abandoned me. There was only her rhythm. Click, click, click. One night, desperate, I called Han. "Tell me how to stop this," I begged. His voice trembled. "There is no stopping, only enduring. She punishes until balance is restored." "What balance? What does she want from me?" "Obedience," he whispered. "Always obedience. Do what she says. Never resist." "But I don't know the rules," I shouted. Silence, then, "You'll learn, or you won't survive." That night I dreamed again of the hospital. This time the nurse led me to a room I recognized. The surgery ward. The tables gleamed under harsh white light, though the building itself had been abandoned for decades. Instruments lay arranged with meticulous care. Scalpels, clamps, syringes. "Lie down," she commanded. My body obeyed before my mind could resist. I climbed onto the table, the cold steel burning through my clothes, straps coiled from nowhere, tightening across my wrists and ankles. The nurse hovered above me, her stitched smile stretching. She produced a syringe filled with a cloudy white liquid. I struggled, but the straps bit deeper. "This is correction," she said. I screamed as the needle pierced my arm. My veins burned, ice and fire flooding my blood. My vision blurred. The ceiling seemed to ripple like water. When I woke, I was in my own bed, drenched in sweat. But my arm ached. Rolling up my sleeve, I found a bruise shaped like a spreading flower, the skin tender and hot. Correction had begun. The days after blurred together. I lost track of time. Sometimes I found myself standing in the middle of my apartment, hours gone with no memory. Once I awoke outside the hospital gates, the night air freezing in my lungs, though I had no recollection of how I arrived. Each punishment escalated. Once every photo on my phone, friends, family, landscapes, changed. Each face was replaced by hers, that grotesque grin, eyes like black pits. Another time, my body refused to move. For 3 hours, I sat frozen in my chair, muscles locked, unable to blink, while footsteps circled me endlessly. I realized then what the nurse wanted: submission. Not just to hear her rules, but to embody them, to surrender control until I became nothing more than another obedient figure in her endless ward. One night, exhaustion overcame me. I collapsed onto my bed without meaning to. Sleep dragged me into the hospital instantly. She was waiting. Stand, she ordered. I stood. Do not speak. I clenched my jaw shut. She circled me slowly, clipboard pressed to her chest like a relic. Her heels clicked with patient rhythm. When she stopped, she leaned close, her voice precise and cold. You are learning. For the first time, her tone held a trace of approval. Then she tapped the clipboard. My name glowed faintly, the red check mark beside it pulsing like a heartbeat. One more correction, she whispered. Then balance. I dared to whisper, though my voice trembled. What happens if I fail? Her grin widened. Then you join the beds. I woke with the weight of her words crushing me. One more correction, one final test. And if I faltered, I would end up like the faceless figures, eternally breathing but never alive. The list was real. The punishments were real. And now the final stage was coming. Correction begins. The words, one more correction, stalked me like a curse. I could not escape them. Even awake, I heard them echoing in the creak of my floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind outside my window. For days I waited. I told myself I was ready, but readiness is a lie. You can never prepare for the unknown. You can only endure it when it arrives. And it arrived without warning. It was midnight when I heard the first click. Soft, deliberate, echoing from the hallway outside my apartment. I froze in bed, my breath caught in my chest. Another click followed, then another. Steady, patient, like a metronome marking the end of my life. The air thickened with antiseptic. Shadows lengthened across my walls. The sound did not remain outside. It seeped through the door, into my living room. Closer, closer. Then silence. I knew she was waiting. The world around me shifted. My ceiling cracked apart like paper. My walls bled into pale hospital green. The smell of old metal and blood filled my nostrils. When I blinked, my apartment was gone. I stood once again in the abandoned hospital, though this time it was alive. Lights humming, machines buzzing faintly. The halls stretched endlessly, cleaner and sharper than they ever could have been. Time itself seemed to rewind, pulling me into the hospital's memory. And there she was, the nurse. Clipboard clutched to her chest, heels gleaming, stitches across her mouth straining against an unseen smile. Follow? Her command was absolute. My body obeyed, though my mind screamed to resist. She led me through corridors I had never seen before, past rooms where shadows huddled on beds, rising and falling with shallow breaths, past windows that reflected not me, but endless rows of empty wheelchairs. Finally, we stopped before a door marked Surgery Theater 3. The brass letters gleamed, though they should have been tarnished decades ago. Enter, she said. I pushed the door open. The room was vast, circular, with tiers of seats rising around an operating table at the center. An old amphitheater, where doctors once observed surgeries like students at a lecture. The table gleamed under a single harsh light. Instruments glittered on a tray beside it. Scalpels, saws, clamps. Each seemed freshly cleaned, though no hand had touched them in years. Lie down, she commanded. My legs shook. My body resisted, but invisible hands pushed me forward. Cold metal kissed my back as I sank onto the table. Straps coiled from nowhere, binding my wrists and ankles. I felt like prey prepared for slaughter. The nurse leaned close, clipboard hovering over my chest. The final test begins. She turned, gesturing to the empty seats. One by one, shadows appeared, filling the amphitheater. Dozens, then hundreds. Patients in gowns, staff in uniforms, faceless and silent. Each turned their eyeless gaze toward me. My heart thundered. The silence was unbearable. Finally, the nurse raised her voice, low but caring. Obedience is tested in 3 ways: pain, silence, and surrender. She tapped her pen against the clipboard, each strike reverberating through my bones. If you resist, you fail. If you speak without permission, you fail. If you do not surrender, you fail. And if you fail, Her stitched smile widened. You join the beds. The first test began. She picked up a scalpel and pressed it against my arm. The blade was cold, precise. She made a shallow cut, blood welling bright and hot. I clenched my jaw, my breath shuddering. Do not cry out, she whispered. She cut again, deeper this time. The pain seared, fire crawling up my veins. My body arched, desperate to scream, but I held it in. Only a ragged breath escaped me. The shadows in the seats leaned forward, as if waiting for me to break. The nurse tilted her head. You endure. Good. The second test followed. She set the scalpel aside and placed her gloved hand over my mouth. The pressure was unbearable. I could not breathe. Panic clawed my chest, my body thrashing against the straps. My lungs screamed for air. Be silent, she hissed. Darkness crept into the edges of my vision. Spots of light burst behind my eyelids. My mind begged to cry out, to gasp, to fight. But I forced myself still, choking silently beneath her hand. At last she released me. I sucked in air, coughing, trembling. You obeyed, she said, her tone almost approving. The third test was the worst. She lifted the clipboard and placed it gently on my chest. The paper burned cold against my skin. I glanced down and saw my name glowing there, the red check mark pulsing like a heartbeat. Erase it, she commanded. I stared, confused. Erase. Her stitched mouth stretched wider. Surrender your name. Surrender yourself. If you cling to who you were, you fail. If you give yourself to me, balance is restored. The shadows leaned closer, expectant. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. I shook my head weakly. If I give you my name, I'll cease to exist. That is correction, she whispered. I thought of my family, my life before Korea, the streets of New York, the laughter of my sister, the warmth of a world untouched by this cursed place. All of it felt distant, fragile, already fading. But the nurse was patient. She waited, her pen poised above my name. Speak it, she urged. Say it, and it will be gone. No more suffering, no more fear, only silence. The shadows murmured faintly, a chorus of faceless voices pressing me to surrender. I closed my eyes. My heart pounded. Was survival worth the price of forgetting myself? Would obedience save me or damn me to eternity among the faceless? Her pen hovered. My name pulsed. And in that moment I whispered, but the lights cut out. The amphitheater plunged into darkness. The nurse froze. The shadows fell silent. From the back of the theater, a sound echoed. Heavy boots, not heels. A man's voice rang out, rough and urgent. Don't say it! Don't surrender! The voice jolted me. I turned my head, straining against the straps. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an old military jacket. His face was pale, eyes sunken, but alive with desperate intensity. The nurse hissed, her stitched smile twisting into rage. Out of turn, she spat. He is not permitted. The man ignored her. He looked straight at me. I was like you, he said. An American, a soldier. I failed the test. Don't let her take you. Hold on to your name. It's the only thing keeping you human. The nurse raised her scalpel, her voice sharp as broken glass. Silence. The man stepped closer, his boots heavy on the floor. She can't erase what you refuse to give. Remember that. The shadows stirred, restless. The nurse trembled with fury, and I lay there, my name glowing, the pen poised, torn between surrender and defiance. The amphitheater felt like a coffin with no lid. The air pressed down on me, thick with the stench of antiseptic and iron. My wrists still throbbed against the straps, but my attention was locked on the figure who had dared interrupt the nurse's ritual. The soldier. His boots echoed heavy, defiant, out of rhythm with the nurse's clicking heels. His face was pale, skin stretched too thin over his cheekbones, eyes hollow like craters. But there was will in him, rage, desperation. "You're not supposed to be here," the nurse hissed, her stitched mouth straining as if the threads might snap. The soldier ignored her. His gaze was fixed on me. "Don't give her your name. That's how she owns you." The nurse slammed the clipboard down onto my chest, her pen trembling in her gloved hand. "He is a failure, a voice from the beds. He has no authority." But the soldier barked a laugh, bitter and raw. "Authority? You think I care about rules anymore? Rules didn't save me. Rules damned me." He stepped closer, and for the first time I noticed his uniform was torn, stained with something dark that no washing could erase. His dog tags dangled from his neck, clinking faintly. "I came here in '94, he said. "Base was nearby. We heard stories about this hospital. Ghost stories, dares, the usual. I thought it was just another drunken thrill. But I made the same mistake you did. I walked in after midnight." He gestured toward the nurse, "and she found me." The nurse circled the table, heels striking faster now, like a predator pacing before a kill. "Enough," she snapped. "He belongs to me. You will too." But the soldier pressed on, his words like lifelines cast into my drowning mind. "She tests you. Pain, silence, surrender. If you give in, if you let go of your name, you become one of them." He pointed toward the amphitheater seats. My stomach lurched. The faceless shadows shifted, their heads twitching in unison. They were all like us once, visitors, patients, staff. Anyone foolish enough to cross her path. She keeps them breathing, but not alive. Trapped. Eternal. I tried to speak, my throat dry as dust. How are you still you then?" The soldier's expression twisted. "Because I refused. I wouldn't surrender my name. She punished me again and again, until I broke. But not enough for her to erase me. I exist in between. Not alive, not gone. Just stuck." He turned his hollow eyes toward the nurse. "She hates me for it." The nurse froze mid-step, her stitches pulled taut, her eyes glowing faintly in the sickly light. "You will not interfere again," she said, voice sharp as bone snapping. But the soldier squared his shoulders. "As long as I remember who I am, you can't silence me." He turned back to me. "That's the truth. That's the warning. Remember your name, no matter what." The nurse's fury ignited. The amphitheater trembled, walls quivering as if the building itself feared her wrath. Lights flickered violently. The faceless shadows writhed, whispering in a chorus that burned my ears. "Correction must continue," she shrieked. "He will not escape. Neither will you." She raised the scalpel high. For one terrible instant, I thought she would drive it into my chest. But instead she slashed the air. The room shuddered, and suddenly the soldier was flung backward, his body crashing against the far wall. I screamed. He crumpled but pushed himself up, spitting something dark onto the floor. His voice was hoarse but unbroken. "Listen to me. I couldn't beat her, but maybe you can. Hold on to yourself. Even when she takes everything else, hold on." The nurse lunged toward him, heels striking like thunder. But before she reached, the lights cut out again. Darkness swallowed the amphitheater. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. Then a single sound. Click. Not from her, from somewhere else. Another pair of heels, softer, lighter, echoing from the far side of the room. The nurse hissed, furious. "No! Not you!" Her voice faltered. For the first time, I heard fear in her tone. A figure stepped into the glow of the single overhead lamp. A woman in a pale hanbok, her hair long and flowing, face hidden behind a white mourning veil. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, her wooden shoes tapping in rhythm with the nurse's steel heels. The soldier whispered awe in his voice. "The mourning bride." I had heard the legend before. A ghost said to wander hospitals, looking for her groom who never came back from war. But seeing her now, real and silent, I felt the weight of two worlds colliding. The nurse staggered back, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "This is my ward, my rules." The veiled woman said nothing. She only walked closer, her presence colder than winter itself. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in white mist. The nurse shrieked, her fury twisting into desperation. "Leave! He is mine!" But the mourning bride raised her hand, pointing at me. The soldier gasped. "She's choosing!" The nurse recoiled as if burned, her stitches strained, her body trembling. For the first time, she seemed powerless. The bride lowered her hands slowly, then turned and drifted toward the exit. Her veil brushed against the floor, her steps echoing like a lullaby for the dead. The soldier gritted his teeth, his voice urgent. "Go with her. If she chooses you, you might have a way out. Don't stay here, not with the nurse." My body trembled, my mind torn between terror and hope. The nurse's eyes bored into me, furious, betrayed. "If you leave," she hissed, "correction will never end. You will never rest." The soldier shouted over her. "Better to wander free than rot in her ward." And then the straps vanished. My body was suddenly free, the weight of the clipboard gone from my chest. My wrists burned with the memory of restraint, but I could move. The bride paused at the doorway, her veil glowing faintly in the dark. Waiting. The nurse lunged forward, her scalpel flashing, her heels slamming against the tile like gunshots. "Choose!" she screamed. The soldier's voice cut through the chaos. "Now decide!" I stumbled off the table, my legs weak. My heart thundered. On one side, the nurse, furious, a force of endless punishment. On the other, the bride, silent, unknown, her outstretched hand promising escape, or perhaps a fate worse than death. I hesitated, caught between two nightmares. The shadows leaned forward in their seats, faceless heads tilted, waiting to witness my choice. My throat was raw, but I whispered my answer into the charged air. And the hospital trembled, as if the very walls recognized the weight of my decision. When I stepped from the operating table, the floor was no longer steady beneath me. Each tile felt softer than the last, like walking across layers of damp paper. The air shifted, lighter but colder, as if some unseen hand had drawn me out of the nurse's dominion and into a new corridor entirely. The mourning bride glided ahead of me, her white veil trailing like smoke. She never looked back, never acknowledged my presence with a word, yet I knew she expected me to follow. Her steps echoed softly, wooden shoes tapping like a funeral drum muffled by distance. Behind me, the nurse shrieked, an animal sound raw and hateful. Her scalpel clanged against the wall, but the amphitheater receded like a dream dissolving at dawn. I did not turn back. The corridor stretched impossibly long, lined with old lanterns that flickered though no flame burned inside. Their glow was pale blue, unearthly, casting the walls in hues of morning silk. The silence here was heavier than before, but not cruel. It was reverent, like the hush of mourners walking behind a coffin. I whispered into the void, "Who are you?" The bride did not answer. Her veil swayed with each step, as if stirred by a wind I could not feel. We passed door after door, each etched with strange characters I could not decipher. Korean, yes, but older, more ceremonial, like inscriptions carved into ancestral tablets. Sometimes the doors pulsed faintly, as though something breathed within. At one I paused. The wood was cracked, and through the gap I glimpsed rows of photographs pinned to the wall. Black and white portraits of men in military uniforms, their faces solemn, their eyes hollow. Beneath each photograph, a name scrawled in red ink. The bride halted briefly, her head inclining toward the door. Then she moved on. I hurried after her, whispering, "Were they yours? Were they the ones you lost?" Again, no answer. Only the sound of her shoes pulling me deeper. The corridor widened into a chamber. It looked like a wedding hall, abandoned but preserved in death's embrace. Wooden beams arched overhead, draped with faded silk banners. At the center, a long table stood, covered with offerings. Bowls of rice, dried fish, candles burned down to stubs. Dust lay thick on everything, yet the air smelled faintly of incense. The bride paused at the table. Slowly, she reached out and touched one of the candles. The wick flared to life without flame, glowing softly. The room stirred. From the shadows, faint outlines emerged, figures in ceremonial robes, their faces blurred, their bodies thin as mist. They stood in rows like wedding guests awaiting a bride and groom. My chest tightened. This was no wedding. This was a funeral disguised as celebration. The bride turned to me at last. Though her face was veiled, I felt her gaze pierce me. She raised her hand and pointed toward the head of the table, where two chairs faced each other across the offerings. I shook my head. No, I'm not your groom. But the silence pressed in, urging me toward the seat. My legs moved despite myself, carrying me to the chair opposite hers. I sank down, the wood creaking beneath me. She lowered herself gracefully into her own chair. The guests, these blurred, solemn shadows, bowed in unison. The air grew colder still. On the table before me lay an object wrapped in white cloth. I hesitated, then pulled back the fabric. A photograph, faded, edges frayed. It showed a man in uniform, Korean, early 1950s. His face was strong, but his eyes betrayed a sorrow deeper than the war itself. The bride's hand hovered above the photograph. Her fingers trembled. I realized this was him, the groom who never came home, the one she had waited for until death claimed her. And now, in this endless corridor of the forgotten, she sought another to take his place. My breath hitched. You don't want me, you want him. But he's gone. Her veil shivered as if caught by a wind that carried only grief. The shadows began to hum, low, mournful, like monks chanting for the dead. The sound burrowed into my bones. The bride leaned forward, her voice finally breaking the silence. It was soft, fragile, like cloth tearing in the rain. Names. Bind us. Her words sent a chill crawling through me. The nurse had demanded my name to erase it. The bride spoke of names as threads, anchors across life and death. She extended her hand across the table. Give me yours, share it, bind it to mine. You will walk with me until he returns. Her tone was pleading, desperate yet tender, not the cruelty of the nurse, but something more dangerous. Sorrow that wanted to claim me. I sat frozen. If I gave her my name, I might escape the nurse. Yes. But would I ever return home? Or would I wander eternally at this bride's side, a groom to a ghost? The soldier's voice echoed in my head. Hold on to your name. It's the only thing keeping you human. Yet here was another truth, pressing against me. Perhaps to survive this place, humanity itself was a burden I would have to surrender. The bride's hand lingered, inches from mine. The veil shifted as though she leaned closer, waiting. My heart hammered. I whispered, if I give it, what happens to me? Her voice was a sigh. You will not be alone. The shadows swayed, their hum deepening. The lanterns flickered overhead, their glow bending toward the table. Time thickened, as though the world demanded an answer. I looked at the photograph once more. The man she had lost. His eyes seemed to stare at me, pleading, warning, or perhaps begging me to take his place so she might finally rest. Tears pricked my eyes. I did not know if they were mine or hers. The bride whispered again, softer, bind with me, and then footsteps, heavy boots, striking like thunder. The soldier burst into the chamber, his form flickering with instability, but his rage burning bright. Don't do it, he roared. Don't give her your name either. That's how they both keep us. The nurse with chains, the bride with vows. Different prisons, same end. The shadows hissed, their blurred faces turning toward him. The lantern sputtered. The bride rose, her veil trembling, her sorrow twisting into something sharp. You should not be here, she said, her voice breaking into echoing fragments. The soldier ignored her, his eyes locked on me. You want freedom? Then keep your name. Both of them want to own it. Don't let them. The chamber quaked. Offerings rattled on the table, and I sat between them, bride and soldier, sorrow and fury, each demanding, each warning, each promising something I could not fully understand. The bride extended her hand again, her voice raw with grief. With me, there is gentleness. With her, only torment. Choose, the soldier bellowed, veins straining in his neck. Gentleness? It's a cage dressed in silk. Choose yourself, damn it. Hold your name. The shadows pressed closer, their hum rising to a shriek. The photograph on the table pulsed with light, the man's face warping as if alive. My vision blurred. My hands trembled above the table. The bride's hand, the soldier's warning, the photograph's gaze. The choice loomed before me, heavier than life itself. And once again, I whispered my answer. The words slipped from my lips like blood from a wound. I didn't even recognize my own voice. But the moment I spoke it, the chamber reacted. The shadows fell silent. The humming stopped. The lanterns burned steady, their light sharpening into something crueler. The bride's veil quivered. Slowly, she lowered her hand onto mine. Her fingers were cold, softer than ash, yet their grip was unyielding. "You are mine," she whispered. The photograph on the table glowed with sudden intensity, the face of the soldier in uniform blurring, reshaping. My stomach dropped. His strong jaw softened, his eyes shifted, and gradually, the face became my own. I gasped. "No?" The bride tilted her veiled head. Sorrow thickened her voice. "You will be him until he returns." A tremor shook the chamber. The soldier stormed forward, his boots slamming the floor. His hollow eyes burned with fury. "This is what she does. She makes replacements. She binds the living to her grief. You'll never leave." The bride's veil snapped toward him, though her body never moved. Her voice sliced through the silence like glass breaking. "You were unworthy. You refused the vow. That is why you rot between worlds." The soldier snarled. "Better rot free than live chained to your mourning." His form flickered, unstable, as if the very chamber fought against his intrusion. I tried to pull my hand away, but the bride's grip tightened. My skin burned where her fingers touched, a frostbite deeper than bone. I whispered, desperate, "Why me? Why not let him rest? Why not follow him instead of replacing him?" For the first time, her veil lifted slightly in the lantern's glow. Not fully, just enough to glimpse the outline of lips cracked by sorrow, skin pale as death. "Because he never died," she said. The room froze around me. The soldier stopped in his tracks. His fury faltered, replaced by shock. "What did you say?" The bride's voice quivered, torn between love and rage. "He did not fall in battle. He abandoned me. He lived. He left. He married another." The shadows shuddered violently, their forms breaking into splinters of smoke. The lanterns flared, exposing the hall's true form. This was no wedding chamber. It was a morgue. The offerings were not food, but jars of preserved organs. The banners above were blood-stained shrouds. The chairs were not for guests, but for corpses lined neatly against the walls. And at the head of the table, opposite me, the bride's chair was nothing more than a coffin lid propped upright. The soldier staggered back, horrified. "All these years, you weren't waiting. You were hunting." The bride's veil lowered again, hiding her twisted grief. Her fingers dug into my skin. "If he will not return, I will make another, again and again, until the vow is fulfilled." Her words echoed through the chamber, and suddenly I saw them. Faces flickering in the smoke. Men, dozens of them, all wearing the groom's face. All trapped, all hollow. Some wept, some screamed. Others simply stared with dead eyes. They were not him. They were his shadows. And I was to be the next. The soldier roared, lunging at her, but his hands passed through the bride's veil like smoke. She barely flinched. Your fury sustains you, nothing more, she said, but his vow sustains me. And now, she tightened her grip on me, her voice low, possessive. He is mine. Pain shot through me, my chest constricted, breath stolen. I felt my own face shifting, molding, as though unseen hands were sculpting me into another man. The soldier dropped to his knees, slamming his fists against the floor. Fight her! Fight her with your name! But my name slipped further from me, a candle burning low. I shut my eyes, forcing memory into focus. I recalled my parents' voices, the letters I once signed, the sound of friends calling me by name. Each memory flickered like dying sparks. The bride's voice pressed against my ear. Forget them. They abandoned you, just as he abandoned me. But I will not. I will keep you. Her sorrow was suffocating. It wrapped me like chains. And yet beneath it, there was rage. A rage that had turned her into something worse than the nurse. Not a punisher, but a captor of love twisted into obsession. I forced the air through my throat, rasping, "My name is mine." The bride recoiled, her grip faltering for the first time. The veil flared outward as though caught in a storm. The soldier staggered to his feet. "Yes, say it again." "My name is mine," I screamed, voice cracking. The photograph on the table shrieked, tearing itself into shreds of flame. The faces in the smoke howled, splintering, scattering like ash. The bride clutched her veil, her form flickering. "No, no, you will not leave me again." The soldier grabbed my arm, his touch suddenly solid. "Run!" The chamber exploded into chaos. Corpses toppled from the walls. Shadows clawed at the air. Lanterns shattered one by one. The bride's scream shook the floor, shaking dust from the beams. I stumbled after the soldier, the corridor unraveling behind us. Doors splintered, inscriptions bled. The world tearing apart like paper soaked in water. Still, her voice chased me. "You will return. All men return to me." Her footsteps followed, soft and steady, no matter how far we ran. Click, click, click. The sound of her shoes echoed, not behind, not ahead, but everywhere. We burst through a final door. The corridor vanished, replaced by a stairwell spiraling downward into blackness. The soldier yanked me forward. "Down! It's the only way!" I hesitated at the edge, the darkness below yawning like a throat ready to swallow us. "What's at the bottom?" His face twisted. "The truth. And maybe a way out." The bride's scream thundered closer. The stairwell trembled beneath our feet. There was no time left. Together we plunged downward into the abyss. The first step onto the stairwell was like plunging into ice water. The air thickened, heavier with each breath, as though the walls themselves were exhaling old sorrow. The soldier's grip on my arm was iron, but his body flickered at the edges, as though he too might dissolve into the darkness. The staircase spiraled downward with no visible end. Each step groaned underfoot. But when I looked closely, the stairs weren't made of wood or stone. They were bone, pale, worn smooth by countless feet, stacked neatly into the shape of steps. I whispered, my throat tight, "Whose bones are these?" The soldier did not answer. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead. The deeper we descended, the louder the echoes grew. At first it was only our own footsteps returning from the void, but soon other steps joined. Click, click, click. High heels, sharp and deliberate, resonating above us, below us, around us. The sound swirled like a hunting predator, never close enough to see, never far enough to forget. "Is it her?" I asked. The soldier shook his head. "Not just her. All of them." Shadows began to appear along the walls, not cast by any light, but formed out of the darkness itself. Figures traced the spiral above us. Nurses, brides, soldiers, faceless patients. They walked endlessly upward and downward, passing through us as if we weren't there. Their footsteps merged into a single rhythm, a drumbeat of suffering. Each echo was a story, each shadow a memory trapped in the stairwell. One passed through me, and for a heartbeat I felt its life. A nurse scrubbing bloodstains from a floor she would later die on, poisoned by the very air of the ward. Another flickered into me, a patient shackled to his bed, screaming for morphine as bombs thundered in the distance. Each memory branded me, one after another, until my knees buckled. The soldier caught me before I fell. His voice, low but urgent. "Don't let them in. If you carry too many, you won't know which one is yours." I clutched my head. "But they're so loud." He glanced up the stairwell, where the click of heels was growing sharper. "That's the point. She wants you to lose yourself. So when you call a name, it isn't yours anymore." We continued downward. Time fractured. Sometimes the stairs stretched longer than hours. Sometimes a dozen steps vanished beneath us in a blink. My sense of direction withered. There was only down. And with each turn, more shadows joined. Whole parades of the dead. Doctors with empty eyes. Brides clutching bouquets of withered flowers. Soldiers dragging rifles that melted into bone. I asked, half delirious, "Is this the real hospital?" The soldier's voice was bitter. "It's what's left of it. Not the building, but the weight. Every sin, every death, every broken vow, stacked until the stairs couldn't hold anymore. Now we walk on what they left behind." At one landing we stopped. The wall opened into a window that looked not outside but inward. I saw a ward, dimly lit, rows of beds filled with bodies covered in sheets. Nurses moved among them, but their faces were masks, featureless porcelain. They whispered lullabies in voices not their own. I recognized one of the bodies under a sheet. My stomach dropped. It was me. I turned away trembling. "That can't be real." The soldier didn't meet my eyes. "It doesn't matter if it's real. It matters if you believe it." We pressed on. At another landing, the soldier slowed. His shoulders sagged, his flickering form unstable. "We're close," he muttered. "Close to what?" His voice cracked. "To the truth I couldn't face." He stopped before a door set into the stairwell's wall. Unlike the others, it was not sealed with runes or smoke. It was ordinary, metal, rusted, like the entrance to a storage room. The soldier placed his hand on it, trembling. "Behind this is why she waits, why the bride, the nurse, the rest, they never leave." He pushed it open. The room inside was a record hall, shelves stretched into darkness, stacked with folders, photographs, and reels of film. A faint projector whirred, casting flickering images onto the wall. I stepped inside, drawn to the film. It showed grainy black and white footage, a hospital ward full of wounded soldiers. Nurses moved briskly among them, tending wounds, injecting medicine. At first it seemed normal, but then I noticed the nurses' smiles were too wide. Their hands lingered too long with the syringes. The patients' eyes glazed, one by one, as though life was being drained rather than saved. My stomach twisted. This wasn't healing. It was harvesting. The soldier's voice trembled. "They called it mercy. They said the hospital couldn't feed or medicate everyone. So they chose. Some were helped. Others were kept for the experiments." His eyes lowered, shame weighing him down. "I was a guard. I let it happen." I stared at him, horrified. "You knew?" He nodded, hollow. "I thought it was duty. I thought it was war. But every scream, every death, it clings to this place. That's why none of us leave. Not them. Not me." The projector flickered, changing reels. This time it showed a wedding photograph. A young bride in traditional hanbok, standing beside a soldier groom. But his face was torn away, scratched out violently. The bride we had seen, the one who hunted vows, stood frozen in the picture, her smile trembling, eyes full of dread rather than joy. The soldier beside me whispered, voice breaking, "That was me." The ground tilted. I stared at him. "You? But you said..." He shook his head violently. I was promised to her, but when the orders came, I abandoned the vow. I left her waiting, and when I returned, she was already dead. His fist clenched. Her spirit couldn't forgive me, couldn't forgive the lies of this hospital. So she waits, she binds, she hunts, because of me. The stairwell moaned. The sound of high heels surged, deafening now. Click, click, click. The bride's voice echoed through the hall, grief sharpening into rage. You cannot run from vows. The projector burst into sparks, reels unraveling. Shadows poured from the shelves, faces screaming silently, hands clawing for release. The soldier grabbed me, desperation in his eyes. Now you know it's me she wants, not you. If I face her, maybe you can leave. But you have to keep your name. Promise me that. I shook my head, panic clawing at me. She'll destroy you. He managed a bitter smile. She already has. The stairwell trembled violently, cracks splitting the bone steps. The sound of heels was no longer echoing. It was here, directly above us, descending fast. The soldier shoved me toward the stairs. Go! I stumbled, torn between escape and loyalty to the only ally I had. His form flickered, growing thinner, as though already surrendering himself to her wrath. The last thing I heard before I plunged downward was his voice, echoing like a final prayer. Remember your name. It's the only truth you'll have left. The stairwell ended without warning. One step there, the next step gone. I stumbled forward, nearly collapsing, my breath ragged. The descent had felt endless, and yet now I stood in a cavernous hall, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor polished like black glass. My reflection stared up at me from below, pale and exhausted, eyes wide with terror. But the reflection did not move when I did. It only watched. A chill swept the chamber. Click, click, click. The high heels descended from the unseen dark above, their rhythm steady, merciless. From the far end of the hall, lanterns flared to life one by one, illuminating two figures, the nurse, the bride, side by side yet not touching. Two faces of the same grief, two masks carved from the same wound. The nurse's veil fluttered like smoke, her bandages soaked with shadow. The bride's handbok gleamed ghost white, her veil trembling as if from silent sobs. Their voices overlapped, a chorus of mourning. You cannot leave, not without giving what is owed. My chest tightened. The soldier's words haunted me. Remember your name. But even as I tried, the echoes of other names pressed against me. Patients, soldiers, husbands, strangers. All the shadows I had brushed against in the stairwell clamored inside my skull, begging me to carry them, to call them. If I faltered, if I let one slip from my mouth, I would vanish into them. The bride lifted her hand. The photograph she once showed me shimmered into existence, but now it bore no face at all, just a hollow blur where the groom should be. You, she whispered, her voice trembling between love and rage. You will complete the vow. The nurse stepped forward, her bandages unraveling, revealing a face without features. Her voice crawled through the chamber like the hiss of gas escaping pipes. All promises end here. Yours will burn with the rest. The lantern shook violently. My reflection in the floor opened its mouth, mouthing words I could not hear, as if mocking my silence. I clenched my fists. No, my name is mine. The nurse tilted her faceless head. The bride's veil trembled. For the first time they faltered. But the floor beneath me cracked open. From the fissures rose hands, black, skeletal, clawing at my ankles. Shadows of all the men who had been claimed, the groom's replacements. Their eyes burned, their mouths stretched wide as if to scream my name for me. I staggered, fighting them off. Their voices poured into me, heavy and suffocating. Join us. Take the vow. Be forgotten. I bit down hard, tasting blood in my mouth. Not my name. Not theirs. Mine. The bride advanced, her footsteps ringing louder than all the others. Click, click. She reached for me. Say it. Say the vow. Be mine, and I will end your suffering. The nurse's bandages writhed, her form spreading like smoke, wrapping the hall. Or be nameless, and I will keep you forever. The two forces closed in, grief and punishment, love and despair. Their power suffocated the air. I fell to my knees, choking. My own reflection in the black glass floor leaned close, whispering a name I could not hear. My own. I forced air into my lungs, my throat raw. My name, I whispered. The shadows froze. The bride stilled. The nurse halted. All leaned in. My name is... The soldier's voice echoed inside me, faint but fierce. Say it. It's all you are. My name is... I screamed it. My true name. The one my parents gave me. The one my life had carried. It tore from my lungs like fire, blazing through the hall. The floor shattered. Light burst upward, white and searing, consuming the shadows. The skeletal hands recoiled, shrieking. The bride staggered, clutching her veil as though my name had struck her like a blade. Her voice broke. No, you cannot. He left me. He... The nurse convulsed, her bandages catching fire, peeling away into nothing. Her scream was not of rage, but of release, echoing long and hollow before dissolving. The lanterns exploded one by one, shards of flame raining down like dying stars. My reflection in the floor burned away, leaving only the glass beneath. For the first time, I saw nothing staring back but the void. The bride fell to her knees, veil collapsing around her. Her voice shook, softer now, desperate. If not him, if not you, then who will stay with me? I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her something kind, something that might ease the centuries of waiting. But my name still burned in my throat, searing me. I could speak nothing else. She reached for me one last time, but her fingers passed through, scattering into ash. Her veil dropped empty onto the glass floor. Silence. The hall breathed once, then exhaled for the last time. The shadows were gone. The echo of heels finally faded. I stood alone, trembling, my voice raw. My name still echoed faintly, like a bell after a storm. I whispered it again, softly, to remind myself it was real, that I was real. And for a moment, I believed. But the silence did not last. From far above, faint but unmistakable, came the sound. Click, click, click. As if the stairwell had no end. As if the vow had not broken, only shifted. I lifted my head. The hall was empty, but the air pressed heavy again. The absence of the bride was not release. It was only a pause. The weight of the hospital, of its sins, of its waiting, still lingered. My name had burned them back, but it had not erased them. I thought the hall would dissolve, that the black glass would crumble, and I would wake somewhere, anywhere, other than here. But when I blinked, I was standing in a corridor, not the endless stairwell, not the cavernous hall, a hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, one flickering in its casing. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, but sour, as though time had spoiled it. White walls, peeling paint. Rows of closed doors numbered in neat rusted plaques. For a heartbeat, relief flooded me. This was real. This was the hospital as it had once been. Then the silence settled, too heavy, too aware. I took a step forward. Click. My breath caught in my throat. The sound hadn't come from me. I wore no shoes. My bare feet whispered against the linoleum. The click came again, behind me. High heels. I turned slowly. The corridor stretched empty, fluorescent lights buzzing, shadows pooling at the edges. No figure stood there, only air. But the sound came again, steady, patient. Click, click. I ran my tongue over dry lips. My name still burned faintly in my chest, a last ember of resistance. I whispered it again under my breath, clinging to its shape. The corridor responded with silence, and then another step. Click. Closer this time. I walked forward, refusing to look back. Each step I took echoed softly, but always answered by the sharper, heavier step that wasn't mine. The corridor stretched ahead like a throat, swallowing light. Each door I passed bore a plaque with a number, but none would open. My fingertips brushed the handles, cold as iron, unyielding. The numbers blurred, shifting as I passed. 302, 413, 515. As though the building could not decide what room was what, as though memory itself rotted in its veins. Click. Closer still. A draft stirred. I looked up. At the end of the hall, a window glowed faintly with moonlight. The outside. Freedom. I hurried toward it, my chest hammering. My name burned louder, as though sensing the chance. But with each step, the corridor lengthened. The window did not approach. It receded further and further, mocking me. Click. Now right behind me. I stopped. My body trembled, but I turned. The corridor was empty. Only the flickering lights, the peeling walls, the numbered doors. But the sound didn't stop. Click. From the ceiling this time. I looked up. For a heartbeat, I saw her veil hanging like a shroud, her silhouette pressed against the flickering light. Then it vanished. I staggered back, breath shallow. My mind whispered, "Say your name again." Hold it. My name is... But the words faltered, not because I forgot, but because something else spoke with me. From my own lips, another voice layered over mine, a whisper that wasn't mine, that wasn't the bride's, wasn't the nurse's, a voice of the hospital itself claiming me. My name is... It hissed, twisting the syllables, warping them into something unrecognizable. I clamped my jaw shut, horrified. The corridor shuddered. A door to my left creaked open. Room 404. Darkness seeped from within, thick as tar. The number plate rusted and flaked, the digits warping until they were nothing but scratches. I stepped back. The darkness within writhed, shape shifting, patients writhing in beds, nurses bending over them, syringes gleaming. A bride's veil drifted across the black, then dissolved. 1,000 voices whispered from the room. None spoke words. They only breathed, waiting. I slammed the door shut, but the corridor had changed. All the doors now stood open, yawning black. From each one, whispers spilled. From each, the smell of rot and iron. Shadows leaned from the thresholds, eyeless faces peering, mouths stretching in silence. The corridor was no longer silent. It was alive. Click. The high heels struck once more. But now the sound was not behind, not above, not below. It came from everywhere. Every door, every shadow. Click, click, click. I pressed my palms to my ears, desperate. No, I am me. I am... My name tore from my throat again, blazing. For a moment, the corridor recoiled, lights flickering. The doors slammed shut with thunderous cracks, shadows evaporating like mist. I gasped for air. Silence returned. I was alone again. Slowly, I lowered my hands. My heart pounded, but relief surged. My name still burned, fragile but intact. I turned back to the glowing window and froze. The reflection in the glass was not mine. A veil covered its face. White silk trembled with the breath of something waiting. Behind the veil, faintly, eyes glowed, watching. Click. The sound rang inside my skull, though no heel struck the floor. I stumbled back. My reflection did not follow. It leaned closer, pressing its hands against the glass, as though eager to step through. And then it whispered. Not my name. Its own. A name I almost recognized. One of the shadows from the stairwell. One of the men who had vanished before me. His syllables slid into my mind, pressing against my memory, threatening to overwrite it. I clutched my skull, screaming silently. Not mine, not mine. But my name faltered, its ember dimming. The window shattered. Glass rained like crystal shards, moonlight bleeding into the corridor. From the broken frame, the bride stepped through. Her veil billowed, her heels gleaming wet in the pale light. Her voice was soft, sorrowful, almost tender. You held your name well, better than most, but even the strongest ember burns out. She extended her hand. The corridor stretched endlessly behind her. Door after door, shadow after shadow, waiting. I backed away, whispering my name again, forcing the ember to spark. She tilted her head, veil trembling. Say it all you like. The corridor remembers longer than you. It always waits. Click. Her heel struck once more. The sound didn't echo outward. It echoed inward, into me. My heartbeat fell in step with it. Click, click. Each pulse weaker, less mine. I fell to my knees, hands gripping the cold linoleum. My name slipped between my teeth, faint, dying. The corridor breathed in and whispered it back to me. Wrong, twisted, stolen. My ember went out. Darkness swept the corridor. The lights died. The doors creaked open once more, shadows spilling. The veil filled my vision, white silk suffocating the air. The last thing I heard before silence swallowed me was the sound of high heels. Click, click, click. Endless. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.